Another stream from the ACT Chess Association of their online events, which are currently being held in livechess.org, while ACT Chess is still in lockdown, and at this stage will be in lockdown until the middle of October. My name is Sean Press. I run these events on behalf of the ACT Chess Association and do these summaries the following day. And this came from last night's standard event, which means that there was a long time control tournament with players playing with a time limit of 40 minutes at the start, plus 15 seconds per move added on. And we've got about 24, 26 players playing in this tournament, not all of them playing at the same time. A few people have had to take a break. And this is round 5, so there's one round to go. And the game I'm focusing on today is played between Sly Pig, 123, and Paul, 889, which is in fact Cam Cunningham, President of the ACT Chess Association, and Paul Dunn, Treasurer of the ACT Chess Association. And both of these players have been playing chess for years and years and years and years. So it's not a junior versus junior event game this time. It's more experienced players. And there's a couple of very interesting points all the way through this game. Partially, one of the key things to pay attention to here is both players are rated about 1200 on the Australian Chess Federation rating list. They are rated about 1850 to 1900 on Lee Chess, which probably says something about this. But it's one of these games where both players are very good at making the direct threats on their own, but missing the threats of their opponents. And that's probably what I focus on today. So we're going to start off with Caro Khan, which is favourite opening Paul's. So we're going to go theory for a bit. Bishop to attack the knight. Knight goes back, bishop to g6. And in the game, h4 was played, and this is the main line. But there's some stuff about h4 that I've decided that personally I don't like, because some of the positions I've got, I've not been a fan of. The pawn on h5 just sort of sits there and really doesn't do enough. You could play knight f3 straight away here, but after knight d7, ostensibly to stop knight e5, bishop d3. And this is one of the interesting points about why h4, h5 is even a thing in the Caro Khan. So imagine we've got this position here. If, for example, black plays knight gf3, no, f6, and white takes, swaps the bishop off like this, and we take back with the h-pawn, black's position's okay. And also there's a h-file, open h-file, which kind of dissuades white from castling on the king side. If, on the other hand, instead of playing knight gf6, black plays the absolutely horrible h6, then bishop takes, f takes, and white is significantly better. The f7 square is weak, the g6 pawn is a target, and queen d3 pretty much picks up a pawn in this position. So black isn't willingly going to play a horrible move like h6 in this position. Okay, and by the way, after this position, it's better for white, not to take, but in fact just to castle an e6, because what we really want to have happen here is white wants black to take. So white is really keen for black to play bishop takes d3. But with the pawn on h7, there's no requirement for black to capture. Black can just leave the bishop there. So this is why h4, this kind of explains why h4, h6, h5 gets played. We could also play knight f3 here, knight d7. And after bishop d3, note we're now planning to play bishop takes g6. And it has to be the f-pawn that recaptures. So forcing the pawn to go to h6 kind of then forces black to play on d3. And this is why h4, h5 gets played in this line. So h5 and the bishop goes back, and then you play knight f3, knight d7, and then you play bishop d3. That finger's there. And after bishop takes d, queen takes d3. So the question is the pawn on h5 doing anything? And it does a little bit for white, but in practice I've also found it quite annoying, because if you move your knight from g3 to e4, for example, and you've moved your rook away from the h-file, then you've got to worry about protecting that pawn. So enough of that little bit of Caro Khan's opening theory. Let's get back to the game. Bishop f4. If you try and be sneaky with knight d5, the bishop's just going to retreat to d2, and then white will play c4 and drive that knight away. And essentially that knight has just wasted some time. So Excuse my sneezing. E6 to let the other bishop out. Castle's queenside, which is pretty normal here. And at this point, it's where black starts to go a little bit wrong in a very instructive way. So bishop e7, castle kingside, I generally think is okay in this position. c5 turns out to be a mistake, which isn't punished, by the way. And this is, I'm going to get to this point in a bit about punishing mistakes. c5 is a mistake because black hasn't castled yet. Black really needs to get the king to safety because white has developed all their pieces, has open files in the center. And the goal here for white to win this game and to win this game quickly is simply to open those central files with a move like d5 if possible. The fact that black has played c5 enables white to open the files even quicker. So black is playing the wrong move with c5. No good trying to open the center if it's your king trapped in the middle. So that's the first real big takeaway from today's game. Don't open up the center until your king is safe. So white played king b1 here, missing kind of the stronger move. And knight e4 is the stronger move here. So we go knight e4. And imagine that knight takes on e4. Queen takes here. Queen goes to b6 to cover the b7 pawn down here because the queen was looking in this direction. Okay, and now d5 follows that suggestion that I gave before, which is the king's now trapped in the middle of the board. You're threatening to take on e6 and completely open up the position because if you play pawn takes e6 and the queen comes across to take, then b7 is weak. If you take with the f pawn, then g6 is weak. The queen can go to g6, and at the same time, the rooks can come here. So white has an ideal position to keep attacking, just didn't take advantage of it. Instead, after knight e4, imagine that black plays c takes d4, and we get a line here which demonstrates how bad it is leaving your king trapped in the center. Note, not all these moves are forced, but I want to show you exactly what can go wrong. Queen takes e4, and the threat is actually just to sacrifice the knight on e6, because if black plays a move like rook c8, it's not a bad move. It does lose by force in this position, but I'm playing it just to show what can happen if you're not paying attention. Knight sack. Knight takes e6, pawn takes e6. Don't grab the pawn. You play queen g6 instead, which forces the king to e7, and then the bishop just comes to d6 and it's mate. And the king's caught in a crisscross of checks along the diagonals. And that's all because the black king is sitting in the middle and white has opened up the position. So if your opponent's king is in the middle and unsafe, and your king is nice and safe and tucked away, try and open up the position. Instead, white played king b1, not a great move. Knight d5, and the bishop retreats. So essentially, we've lost a bit of time. The other way of playing this position is you can just say, I'm giving away the bishop here. So after knight takes and knight takes, white is still a lot better because you've got sacrificial ideas on e6. You've also got d5, and you've got the rook on h1 sailing across to e1 to pile up again on the king in the middle. So black is in serious trouble here, by the way. Bishop went back to d2, rook goes to c8, c4, drive the knight away, the knight goes to b4. A couple of moves here, you could move the queen out of danger onto e2 or e3, but instead taking is fine, taking. And again, b3 is a little bit cautious here. Now, one of the things, to be fair, to players of certain strengths is we play in certain ways that are comfortable to us. We've had games where it's all gone horribly wrong, and we've gone, I'm not going to play risky chess just yet. I'm just going to see what happens. But if you want to get better, a move like d5 is the move you want to be looking at. Nice and dynamic. And let's just see how it can all play out. First choice, knight c5. Queen to e3. Queen to b6. We just swing our rooks in the middle. Notice, still not castling. And say the knight goes to a4, and then it's just a question of takes. Queen takes. And now we've got a pleasant choice between taking on f7, king takes here. White is just up a pawn, and the king is completely exposed. Okay, rook takes is the other move, because if we take the pawn anyway, we're still going to play the same kind of setup. But in this case, the rook can go to g6 to cut off more squares. And then there's a mixture of rooks going to d7 with check, knights going to e5 with check, knights going to f5 to attack a few squares, Note that black can't take the pawn on c4 in this position because knight e5 just forks king and rook. So that's one line opening up the position. Now, by the way, if you want to do some training, Lichess and a couple of other websites always do this, but you can get to a position like this and you can just click play against computer and just learn to practice playing positions like this to get better and better. And because they're winning for white, okay, you know that there are good moves waiting to be found, and it's kind of easier to find good moves if you know there are good moves there. The other line after d5 would be to take, but then rook check is just winning here. Bishop comes in and knight f5, and you can't protect the bishop because it's pinned, and the knight or the rook is just going to capture on e7. So d5 opening up the position was the right idea and you're well. So white played it a bit passively with b3. Okay. Bishop e7. Now knight to e4. Again, our old friend d5 could be played here. Knight e4 and castle. So black has managed to castle. So on one level, the problem for white now is that they've missed their shot in this position. They were coming up with a good, they had some good attacking choices here, but they let the black king slip away, and they've got to come up with another idea. Now, I will point out, and again, with lower rated players, is that that whole notion of opening up the center and stuff isn't as common as I'm just waiting for my opponent to castle and then I'm going to try and checkmate them on the king side. So again, it's a question of sticking with the ideas that you know versus trying new ideas. And g4 gets played, and that's kind of follows the script that I've seen with lots of players, even strong players up to 2,000 rated strength, including myself. And the notion is we just leave our opponent to do their thing. We put our pieces on squares which we think are good squares for an eventual attack. Okay. And then we use our pawns as battering rams to try and open up the position for our pieces. And I think this is the script that white is following here. It's not a bad script, but it tends to be an easier one to defend against if you know what you're doing. f5 does expose the king a little bit. Wasn't a great move. White is better in this position, by the way. So we take, okay. If black plays rook takes here, again, our old friend d5 just keeps doing the biz for us in certain lines. So we took with the e-pawn. Knight goes back to g3. And black played bishop to g5 here. Now, you would be astonished to find that this game ends in about 3 more moves from this position here. Okay, and the fact is there's not a clear winning idea for white in this position until black really helps them along. Could play queen e8. But after rook de1, okay, pinning the bishop against the queen, that's a good position if we want to play that. Or we could have just taken on f5. And after queen f7, knight takes here, queen takes, and then knight here, with the idea of moving the knight into g6. Which, in this case, at least shows that the pawn does belong on h5. Having sort of criticised the location of the pawn on h5, it turns out that it's a good pawn, at least in this case. So, knight g3, bishop g5. Okay. Rook de1 is a small mistake, as we're going to see shortly. Not a huge mistake, just a small mistake. Rook he1 was better. And the main reason it's better, as we'll see in a second, is it means the queen is protected on d3. Because after rook de1, okay, knight went to c5. And because of the pin, pawn takes knight is not feasible in this position, forcing the queen to move. Yeah. But as I said, this game is now almost over. And f4 was a very, very poor move, and I'll explain why in a bit. Okay, the arrow here is a clue, by the way, h7. But knight e4 is another move you can try. We've just played knight takes, f takes, queen takes. Okay, white's up a pawn, and white has a better position. We could try and take on f5, queen f6, queen takes e4, queen takes, swap, 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 and then rook here. Okay, and white is winning this position as well. But this is a good example of having played for an attack. Your opponent has played a move that you may not expect, okay, with knight e4. But a bit of calculation, especially these ones are pretty easy because it's just lots of exchanges. You can still get a different winning position. It doesn't have to be a checkmating winning position. You just simplify into a better position for the ending here. It's the d-pawn mainly here that hopefully will become a queen. Instead, white took here. Now, Knight f5 might be better because we're still working on our attack, but notice the knight on c5, it's running out of squares to go to. Okay, the queen's moved out of danger, so there's no pin. Okay, you have to find a square for the knight. d7's about the only square if you want to move the knight. And then after knight takes g5, I'll go queen takes g5. Knight g7 is a nice move here because if the queen or the king take the knight, then simply one of the rooks is coming to the g file and pinning the queen against the king. We play h takes g5, then you've got knight e7 check, king into the corner, and then h6 sets up a mating attack. So, for example, we take here, rook takes, king g7, queen g6 is mate. And all the white pieces have just come pouring through at the right time to win the game. The other option, instead of moving the knight, is to protect it, or is to counterattack, counterattack the knight on f5. But even then, rook e5 protects the knight. Knight goes back now. We just play d5 here. Knight back to c5, for example. Takes, and we play knight check again. And we're going to follow that up with basically h6 with our crushing attack. As I said before, the script of putting your pieces on good squares and then charging your pawns forward to break up the position is a common one, and it's an effective one, but it does occasionally mean that your opponent can defend a bit better. Instead, white took here, okay, and again, the best move here is not to take with the pawn, take with the queen, but then we still get rook e5 here, queen to f6, now we play knight f5, and knight e6, queen e4, and white is better in this position, but there is no immediate knockout win just yet. Instead, black committed the cardinal sin of not paying attention to what their opponent was planning to do. Now, there's a bit of a myth. I was going to say at the start, but I've saved it for now. There's a bit of a myth that lower-rated players believe that they play better chess against stronger players. And why I say it's a myth is because lower-rated players just lose to stronger players as to not so strong players. They just lose in different ways. And in this case, I suspect if black had been playing a stronger player, they would have taken a little bit more time to think about what's going to happen next. But because they're playing someone about the same strength as themselves, they went, well, my plan is now to take the knight here. And the idea is when the knight retreats, then I will take the pawn on f2, and I've got a very strong position, or I'll play rook takes f2, and I've got a very strong position to keep going with. Missing the simple fact that queen h7 was mate in 1. And suddenly the game finished. Okay, not criticising black in the sense that this was all their own fault. It was just the common problem that we often have is we only think of our own plans and we only think of our own moves and we don't think of our opponent's moves. And that was the mistake here that black made. But ultimately, white was better all the way along. White was better because they had more space, because they'd taken control of the centre. A stronger player would have found more play in the centre after this position, after c5. They would have sort of gone on the attack with a move like knight e4, but that's okay. But it is a very instructive game because certainly what I'm finding, especially with lower-rated players that play, is they do tend to focus on their own plans at the exclusion of taking advantage of their opponent's mistakes. And in Lee chess, for example, I think there's a setting you can check on your games. One is called luck, okay, which basically means the number of times your opponent misses punishing you for a bad move. And the other is called opportunism, which is the number of times you punish your opponent for a bad move. So if you're looking at the things, maybe try and have a look at that feature and see whether you're an opportunistic player or not, and whether you're a lucky player or not. So you want to be not lucky, okay, simply because if your opponent fails to punish your mistakes, you probably won't learn from them. But you certainly want to be an opportunistic player, which is when your opponents make mistakes, you do want to punish them. So that was from last night's ACT Chess Association online chess event. My name is Sean Press. I run these events on behalf of the ACT Chess Association. We have Blitz on Monday. We have Rapid on Tuesday, which is 10-minute games. Thursday is our long time control event. On Saturday, we run Street Chess online at the moment with a time limit of 15 minutes flat for 7 rounds. If you wish to join, It's open to people living in Canberra or just outside Canberra who have a connection with the ACT chess scene. Just get onto Lee Chess, look for the ACTCA Fast Chess Club. I do these summaries the day after the events. They normally take about 15 or 20 minutes and around about 10 a.m. in the morning. So thanks for tuning in. My next summary will probably be Sunday morning after Street Chess. So until then, I'll be seeing you later.